Hello world and welcome to Beamstream. So today in episode 4, I believe, of the Coder Sprint podcast, we have today Rick. Why don't you say hi, Rick?
Hello.
Great.
Um,
Um,
uh,
yep,
yeah, just ask me what you want to ask.
yep, sure. So I guess start us off, Rick, with who you are and what you currently do, if that's all right.
Okay. So I'm Rick Ahrens. I'm a software developer and a startup founder, and I've been building companies for quite a while. I've built Cloud9 IDE before, which was an online IDE that was then acquired by Amazon, and I've always been interested in building developer tooling. So right now, I'm building Makepad. It's a Rust-based IDE and design tool. Yeah, I would say I have about, I don't know, 20 odd years, 25 odd years of programming experience in C++, JavaScript, and HTML, of course, and now Rust. So that's a very exciting project. I'll tell you more about it in a minute.
Yep. I guess before we get on to the really interesting parts, I'd like to know more about yourself personally before you got to where you are right now, right? So to kind of start off, I wanted to ask about your formal education, if you have any, and yeah, have you started off with formal education?
Not necessarily. I mean, I've done a bit of physics, but university physics, but I left because it didn't really fit with what I wanted to explore, which was programming. But I didn't really find computer science very appealing because it felt too dry to me, just like mathematics. So I have a bit of formal education, but mostly I've just learned it all myself, which is good and bad. In hindsight, I could have used a bit more computer science for definitely, because doing everything yourself the hard way is it's not the fastest way to get there, but definitely it also gives you a fresh perspective because you don't get stuck in the way they teach you. But yeah, so it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Oh, interesting. In terms of the resources to learn, or rather your learning process, um, because you didn't have any formal education. So what are the kind of steps that you took to kind of get there, basically?
Just build stuff. So it's not that um, let's say I always felt like at the time that studying computer science would be a waste of time because I already knew most of it in my um, expectation, right? At 18 or 19, I could already program C++. I could build anything I wanted to. So it felt like doing computer science was like, they're going to teach me Java, which I don't want to learn, and these things I don't want to learn. But what I would have would have been useful is learning about type systems and maybe some Haskell and these kinds of things that um, take a long time the other way around. But yeah, the general programming thing was not appealing at all because I could already build stuff. I was doing a 3D hardware accelerated stuff on Voodoo graphics cards back in '98 or something. So um, I didn't feel like it would add a lot, but in hindsight, I would say there are definitely a couple of parts that could have added.
Right. So did you actually pretty much programming was more of a tool for yourself to kind of build cool stuff with? Is that pretty much how you gained
Exactly.
knowledge, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I just built it, disregarding knowledge or experience, and you will gain those things as you build it. And um, it, uh, it does give you a sort of I would say, fearlessness about building things. Right now, we're building everything in Rust, and I can do my C++ stuff again, sort of. You can access the system layer, you can write DirectX or COM or Objective-C or all these things directly in Rust. So that fearlessness is kind of back in terms of what it can do. Um, but yeah, so I would say my experience in this is just do it. You'll figure out why it works or why it doesn't work. And in a language like Rust, the compiler will tell you why it doesn't work most of the time, even.
Yeah, most of the time, unless it's C++. I guess
Yeah, no, C++. You're like, where did my lag go? Oh, right.
indeed, right. So actually, you touched upon a few things there. You mentioned a lot about, graphics and, for example, with DirectX. What sort of kind of projects did you build that you saw was an opportunity to build something cool? What kind of projects have you built like during those days?
I've always been attracted to computer graphics. So build like a graphing calculator, or I built VJ software that you could use to do projections in clubs and that kind of stuff. I've done all sorts of art related projects with that, mostly as a hobby side next to consulting for companies on user interface projects or web projects. But yeah, it's graphics is my primary joy. Also, audio is fun. I've been doing a little audio example as well. So right now, when we're building Makepad is like new design tool for applications that are written in Rust. It's a combination of an IDE and a design tool, and for that I need fun examples. So I can kind of go wild on sort of what you would call a hobby project, like an audio player or a fractal zoomer, and but these are example applications. So kind of doubles up that way.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I've used Makepad just for a second, and it's extremely fast. And yeah, in terms of the product itself, it does seem to touch upon several fronts. There's the technicals, of the implementation, and then there's the use case, and then, there's the hackability for developers who want to continue that with Makepad. Is that the kind of philosophy you're going for with that, or?
So the philosophy we're going for is having a live design tool that can manipulate a running application as much as you can with Rust, because Rust is a compiled language. You can't hot modify it very much, just like JavaScript. You have to compile it. So we're trying to put as much dynamism into Rust as you can. So the UI structure is hot editable, just like a web page in a way. And you can connect the design tool to a running application, and then manipulate it directly. So you can manipulate the shaders, you can manipulate UI structure. So yeah, it's a little bit like Visual Studio Code and Figma merged into one conceptual space that works for Rust. And thanks to Rust, we can also now deploy to web, which is one of the main reasons I like the stack. Is whatever you build, you can just deploy to web immediately and share a link, which is what I do with my examples. Makes it much more fun to develop because you can share it with the world immediately.
Yeah, I think every time you have a new update, I'm always there to check it out online. So it's for those that don't know, so Makepad is pretty much a Rust-based web editor, right? And yeah, like Rick said, it has many applications and usages of it. In terms of, so I mean,
The final product is not visible right now. I mean, what you see right now is more of a tech demo of the UI stack. The final product we're kind of building right now, which is a combination of an IDE, a code editor IDE, and a design tool. The code editor IDE part you can see online right now. The design part I'm actually building right now. So
cool.
yeah, nobody has seen it yet, but it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, really excited to see that. Um, I mean, I think we jumped ahead pretty much. I wanted to kind of rewind a little bit into your professional, um, technical understanding to where you got to creating Makepad, right? Um, in terms of the steps all the way to where you are right now, essentially, what other kind of job roles have you gone through before you said, you know what, I'm gonna do my own thing here. I'm gonna create Makepad.
Um, well, I've kind of always had my own company since I was 18. So I've done consulting in, as part of my companies with other companies, which in some sense you would say is a job, right? If you're doing a website or if you're doing an application for a customer, do you really have a company or are you a consultant? So I would say I've done a lot of consultancy, but we've always done it with the dream of building a company or a product, right? So yeah, in that sense, building developer tooling goes back a long way to like 2005 or even earlier. I was building design tools for real-time stage projections, essentially. So you would have a football stadium with, I don't know, 20,000 people and then giant LED wall. And I wrote the software to drive that with a game controller.
Wow.
And um, but that was a design tool that we used in-house, but it was crap. It had a shit UI. And I was always trying to improve the UI systems there. So I built my own stack with XML, just like Winamp, which was hot back in that day, which is 2002 era. Um, so um, um, yeah, at that point, I figured out that I was kind of building a web browser badly. So then I hopped over to the web stack because um, I felt like whatever I did was being done better by a browser. And then I built companies on the HTML stack, did consulting. We built Cloud9, which is a web-based IDE with a code editor. And then I realized all the limitations of the web stack, and they were getting in my way. But with WebGL, I had a way out. And so, yeah, it came full circle where I threw away the entire HTML stack again and started over with hopefully something better. At least it's going to be a lot faster. Can never be as full-featured as the HTML stack, but for a bunch of use cases, I would say it's going to be a lot nicer.
Right, yeah. I mean, it sounds like just as the technology is evolving, your company has also continuously been evolving with the technologies that you've been, following closely, right? Um,
Well, these are all different companies, right? They're like a company I
okay.
had in the 2000s, and then I quit that to do a HTML consultancy that turned into Cloud9, which then I rage quit because HTML was just terrible. I just didn't like it anymore, and then I spent last decade or so in R&D mode with that, of which the last three are now a new startup called Makepad. So
Right,
not
right.
a continuous it's not a continuous company.
I see, I see. It was more of a let's find something more that technologically makes sense in this day and age, right?
Yeah, exactly. You gotta move with the times, right? And sometimes you make a new technology, but yeah, right now, with Rust, is a very good skill set to have regardless. Even if what we build turns into something that we use ourselves, that is beautiful. We can make almost anything. My last company, the Cloud9, all UI we can just build in, I don't know, a month or something. It's really trivial now. Of course, the main problem of that company wasn't actually the UI; it was the cloud. So every company and every has different challenges. However, making UI nice has been a thread through my life, and I think right now I'm closest to actually having something that works.
There's kind of two things that I want to touch on. In terms of your current position, then, I mean, you seem to be a very technologically focused developer. I'm just wondering how you kind of balance that with also being a business owner as well, right? So doing most of the development, but also keeping up with the business. Is that something you have to balance on your side, or?
So absolutely, like I go through productivity waves of I don't know, depends if I hit a problem, but like sometimes 6 months, sometimes 9 months, and then sometimes step out again, and you have to do the business things. You got to arrange money, you got to also arrange people that you work with. Like over time, I've started cooperation now with my two co-founders, a brilliant designer and a super programmer, Sebastian and Eddie. Um, so if I would have only focused on my work, you neglect the other parts of building a company, which are money and people, and you need to do those as well.
And
And for that, I would say the advice would be to play a very long-term game. Like a lot of these things are very slow. So if you're talking with people, it can take many, many years for them to join your company, or for you to be able to afford having them join your company. Or so yeah, um, you gotta keep these things going for a very long time. Like it's just like getting a corporate contract sometimes. It can take a year or something, right? So um, that that is a slow process, and you need to take time for these slow processes besides building technology.
yeah, in terms of the business itself, it sounds like um, essentially, how are you able to sustain a company that's currently sort of in R&D mode, right? Like as you said, Makepad right
Well,
now is a technical demonstration. So how are you able to sustain yourself all this time?
that's all this time. So the company is only really a company for the last couple of years. So before that, I just did consulting. Then we funded it from a bit of consulting, and then we got some angel funding and a bit of other money sources, corporate support. And yeah, you can sustain at least the development with a very, very small group of people. But yeah, beyond this, I would say either we need to scale up sales very quickly, which is something we're going to try, or it's going to be venture capital, if that works out. I mean, it's a mixed bag. I mean, I've already done the venture capital track with my previous startup. It was very educational. Would do it differently this time at all completely, but um, yeah, there are ways. As long as you have a solid idea of what you're building and an idea of who you're going to sell it to, I would say these things can be solved.
So I guess that brings it on to kind of the competition and the space for, you know, editors in general. I'm just curious when it comes to actually selling your product, why would Makepad be better than X, Y, or Z product?
So there's many dimensions to this. There is the fact that we might have the friendliest model, right? Thinking of a business model where somebody pays 100 euros, dollars, whatever, a year, and then you get a perpetual license on the software. So, but you just stop getting updates if you stop the payment. So that should be a very friendly model because there's no login, there's no cloud. We can't lock you out of anything if you can just compile the stuff later on, want to. So that sense, I would say it really depends what you are competing with in that context. It's a big world out there. So if you're like, hey, we're competing with Flutter on mobile apps, well, that's going to be it's going to be tough, because we're on Rust. That's a much more difficult language. We have a lot of work to do on the UI stack for mobile. So that's going to be a difficult pitch. But if you're like, hey, we're doing a data viz dashboard on web, and Makepad draws the stuff we want to show faster, then you're there, right? That's it. You won the competition. So it really, really depends. And I think we have a bunch of use cases in mind that we have a solid story for. One of them is data viz, and other ones are compute heavy things. But the examples that I've so far found, which are the fractal thing or the audio, are a bit domain specific. So I would say most value would be in the direction of data visualization, but we'll see.
Right. I guess it sounds like you're testing the technological capabilities and seeing where it fits into a product. Is that correct? Or
In a way. Like when I came out of Cloud9, I was like, oh, building IDEs with HTML is terrible and it's all crap. But I like having an IDE as a sculpting tool, right? I like having my own IDE I can build a tool with, like a design tool or workflow, or I don't want a giant pile of JavaScript and web browsers and all this complexity. I want a malleable tool that I can shape into whatever I want. And I think we've already achieved that with Makepad today, with the code editor, with the stack. It's very approachable, at least for us. And with the JavaScript stack, it wasn't even approachable for ourselves, right? Like, it was very hard to maintain, very hard to manage, required a lot of people. Right now, I have an IDE, I have a code editor, we have a new version coming in that is going to be even much better. I'm using it myself already for years. It's not been easily accessible for the outside, even though you put it all on GitHub. It doesn't matter, if it doesn't, it's not friendly yet, which it isn't. But I think the technology that we have is solved pretty much my entire front-end engineering problem of my last company. So it's not per se a solution looking for a problem. It's already a solution to a problem I had in the last cycle, and I think a problem that many companies have with their developer tooling. It already solved that. Now we're trying to take it to the next level, where it turns into a proper design tool, where a designer can design a UI, an application, and a developer can work on it together. Without using Photoshop files or whatever, screenshots or exports with CSS in it, or just a unified path where design and development work together.
so
And
that
that's close.
yeah, actually I was going to ask in terms of the current state of UI in general, right? In the generations of HTML and JavaScript that we've, come through. The question is, are we currently in a good state with UI, with the introduction of Rust having a WebAssembly target, or can we be better?
So WebAssembly is really just a virtual machine, or well, a description of a virtual machine that has absolutely no abilities except for allocate memory, and that's all it can do. Everything else you add to WebAssembly is a feature that you need to program. So you need to program the JavaScript layer, talk to the WebAssembly layer. So when you write Rust for WebAssembly, you don't get anything. You just get like C function with numbers as input. No structs, no JavaScript objects, nothing. And everything else is up to you. Like, there have been people building in glue layers from JavaScript to Rust and Rust to JavaScript. Wasm BindGen is
Yeah.
one of them. I don't use it. I have my own thing because I believe in message-based interop, which is just superior. I think it's a superior model for interoperating with WebAssembly. The point is the performance boundary is very lopsided. So if you want to do React in Rust in WebAssembly with a DOM, you're not going to really gain much. You just made the problem bigger. You just made just use TypeScript. If you want to do React or whatever, use TypeScript. If you want to use DOM, use TypeScript. But if you move the entire application into Rust, including all of the state management and the UI and the render stack, then you can see drastic speed improvements. But not if you talk to the web stack as it is. There's just no point to it.
Right. Yeah, no. Yeah, that's definitely interesting. So essentially it looks like if you want to leverage the most out of WebAssembly, everything has to be built within WebAssembly, right? Rather than having a sort of
Pretty
hybrid.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty much. I used to rail against this because I thought, oh, it's another what is it? It's another silo. Web is not about silos, but then again, the web is about silos. Every domain restrictions get stronger and stronger. This whole idea of a put together by different scripts and different servers, it's gone at scale anyway. It's all silos on Facebook, on Google. You can't access YouTube in a browser in a way that it meshes, except for a little frame where the ads show. You can't really remix anything. None of the platforms like Spotify or whatever are open, Bandcamp or whatever it is. It's all completely locked in. You can barely do anything on the web that does mashup today. So the whole idea of the browser being a mashup engine, which was one of the original ideas, is lost. It's gone. It doesn't work. If you're trying to build anything today that does anything with mashups, you're going to have to build a native application. So that sense, the whole my argument against the silo is kind of gone. But what's the difference between building a giant blob of JavaScript and building a giant blob of WebAssembly? Nothing.
Right. Yeah. And in terms of the user experience for using Makepad from a consumer point of view, will we have to deal with the code, or is it truly a drag and drop kind of experience?
So the consumers of our product will be developers and designers of applications.
Cool.
So you should see us as a design tool, like as a Visual Studio Code that has a Figma stuck to it, with Rust as the primary language. So our users are developers and designers. The users of our users are normal consumers, and for them, of course, we try to make our stack as compatible and fast and useful as we can. There's definitely some challenges there. Like I was facing one today where piano on the demo was hooking the text input. So your IME, which is a thing, if you hold the E, it shows a menu of the different E's you can select. Yeah, you need that if you have any kind of multilingual input. But it gets in the way if you're trying to play piano on your computer keyboard. So there's and on mobile, the challenges on web are plentiful. So yeah, we're definitely going to start in niches for our first level users, in terms of, for instance, data viz or interesting creative applications.
Cool, cool. And I think you mentioned this before. So how many people are working with you on this at the moment?
Right now, I have two co-founders. As I said, Eddie, who is a ex-Mozilla brilliant systems programmer. I'm more of the quick developer that sort of sits in between production and prototype. I can move very quickly, but then I need to refactor and rethink. And he is more of the developer that just comes out of the box with something that supports everything and thought of all the edge cases. But he goes a lot slower. And I have Sebastian, who is a brilliant UI designer who if you're building a UI tech company or a design tech company, you need a designer on your founding team, on your core team. So yeah, we just had a meeting today deciding on our brand, and I'm very excited about it. It looks beautiful.
Sounds awesome. It sounds like a really good balance, especially with just three people developing on the product, right? Have you essentially found any it's kind of interesting that you know you basically kind of admit that you're the quick sort of hacky iterative type, whereas another member is a more takes time to you know identify all edge cases. Do you think it's basically important to have this balance when it comes to a team composition level?
For us, definitely. I mean, I would be lost without him, because some of the things we do require that level of attention, and some of the things we do less so. You know, sometimes you need to move fast to figure out the use cases before you spend the energy of doing all the work on all the little details. And so I would say it's a good combo, but we're by no means a fast company. I mean, we've been doing this for 3 years already, right? Like, we've been had my first version of the IDE I'm using today every day after about 9 months of starting to learn Rust from scratch. We've been refactoring for the last 2.5, whatever years in between that, um, nonstop rebuilding. Like, um, I wouldn't say that we are, you know, fast and loose with the prototyping. With the demos, I can quickly put something together, but then we have to take those lessons and rework them. Like, we have a shader compiler that is just an enormous piece of work. That is the platform abstraction for us. You know, like if you style the whole UI with shaders, you gotta have a unified language that compiles to Metal, ArcDex, OpenGL, and WebGL, and in a bit WebGPU. So that is a piece of work. You did not something you can skip. If you skip it, you severely handicap your stack, because now all of a sudden you get some crappy GLSLs that transpiles, or you can't use Metal on Mac, or it's not great. If you don't do your hardware abstraction layer yourself, you're gonna be either spending all your time maintaining someone else's project for that, or it's not a good idea. You got to have it. So we have a lot of technology in the back there that we iterated on, like the code editor. This is version 3 or something, a full rewrite version 3. Because if you're building a code editor that has hybrid inline visual elements, that hasn't really been done very well before. You know, like the web-based editors just fall apart when you try to do anything like that, or get really slow, or just not a good thing. And we want to have the next generation of an actual usable modular code editor. So that takes a lot of time. It's also where a lot of time of my co-founder goes into, like, really thinking about that. And we have many problems that will require a lot of time. But we're cutting corners. We're cutting corners in order to get this at least to a point of minimum viable usability. And one of the corners that we're cutting, for instance, is a multilingual text. I mean, in the sense of very complicated UTF-8 formatting of stuff. It works for what we do, you know, in our side of the world, but it doesn't go vertical, and it doesn't do all these kind of weird ligatures that other languages use. So we'll have to see that after we find a niche that doesn't care about that.
Yeah, I guess you know, text rendering text or handling text is not an easy thing when it comes to multiple
Absolutely not.
targets. Yeah. Um,
It's really complicated.
yeah.
It's absolutely incredibly complicated, and um, but I cannot build what we're building without having to redo that. Um, that means that we're going to have to do it. It's just how it is.
I see that you mentioned a lot of the times around rebuilding. Um, so it sounds like at the moment you're going through a sort of rebuilding phase. And in terms of your roadmap, well, so-called roadmap, what's the end goal with this rebuilding, refactoring phase that you're going through?
Oh, we've been doing that for about 2 years now. And the end goal is something that I feel that we can feed the world and want to support, where we go, hey, no, this is our first version of a UI stack in Rust that, has a properly evaluated set of primitives where we would say, hey, this is probably a good idea. Because if you don't evaluate those primitives yourself, um, what are you doing? We, so for us, it's like you first have to be able to build your own design tool. Design tool examples. Can't do those, then you're not you're not ready to feed it to the world, because all you're going to do is destroy their applications over and over and over again as you're iterating to get to a point where it's good enough. I would say getting there. We're getting pretty close. I've been making a lot of progress there. Those examples that I've been tweeting, these are really the first examples of our UI stack where I go, this is actually not garbage. I could see us building applications this way. But that has taken years, because Rust is not a friendly language for programmers. It doesn't have a GC. For UI, is really inhospitable, if I would call it friendly. So building a model that fits Rust's memory model in a way that it's friendly to UI developers is difficult. And I think I have a path now where I'm like, okay, this code looks all right. And it's actually a conceptual level above the foundations of the system. So this is something that I think is the problem in a lot of the Rust UI space, is that everybody always thinks in a single step to a solution. They're like, oh no, the foundation of the UI stack needs to be exactly user friendly. What if it's a two-step problem? What if the foundational layer is verbose, or not as friendly? Then you layer on a friendly layer. That's at least where I am right now. But you see how much this is. I just figured the second layer part out like last week. So hey, fresh off the press.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, that's how difficult iterating this is.
And I guess when it comes to, I mean, you've mentioned this before with how others think of UI. The question is then, um, I guess, what are the competitions, if at all, are there with a product that's similar to yours? Or is there anything currently?
So of course there's competition. Um, I would say Flutter is the big one. They're redoing the UI stack in a browser, runs in a browser, with a language designed for UI, with a render stack based on Skia, which does all the things we don't have yet, which is super nice vectors and multilingual fonts. But then you realize Flutter has what, hundreds of thousands of developers? We're a 3-person company. Imagine if we get 10,000 users tomorrow. It just be gone. I cannot even. How do you? If what, like 10% of these people ask a question, I'm going to be answering emails till I'm gone, right? So do not make the mistake of comparing yourself to technologies that are this large and this huge. We need slow growth from niches that we do actually we do compete with the big players. There doesn't need to be any illusions that we need to compete with everyone tomorrow. We just need to be useful. for a growing number of people.
Right. That's an interesting approach, especially when, obviously, especially when it comes to investors' money. We want to be able to keep them happy while at the same time, be satisfied with the technological complexity, right? I wonder though, does does the technological complexity affect a business growth, or are you purely focusing on the technology for now?
So, as I said, I don't really have that much to go on, except for the fact that my previous company could have done the UI of my previous company with what we have like that.
Right.
So, and I also am using our own product every day, and I will use the new version hopefully soon because I'm getting really fed up with a 2-year-old IDE that I wrote myself that I haven't added a feature to for 2 years. It's really getting tedious, but it works. It works. It's not great, and I hope to make it great soon. Because if you have your own IDE like that, and you have a level of, I would say, fluency with your tech, you can add features, in an afternoon that are considered complicated or big or whatever if you look at the other projects, but you just do it. And um, so in that sense, I would say, um, this definitely has value. I know it has value for us. I'm the primary focus I have is dog fooding. I use the thing every day myself. That's why I want the new version very, very soon. Our UI designer, our designer is going to use our design product, the design version of the tool, himself all the time, and no excuses. It's like, why can't you do that? Well, then maybe we should add that feature. And once we have a level of dog fooding where all of us are going, well, it could add some features, but I can do my primary work with our own tool, then I would say yes, we have something that I would love to see other people try. Before that, it's more going to be, early release. Hey, look at this kind of situation.
That's an interesting dynamic. So you essentially, the belief in the product is both being a creator of it as well as a consumer of it, right? Which is the testament of the product, right? Which is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's how you
It's
iterate.
rare. It's rare that you can do that with a product as a technologist, right? It's
Yeah,
rare, but we have it. So if you don't use that part of it, you're really doing a disservice to everything, to your company, to your users, everything.
yeah. In terms of like the team members that you work with, do you ever feel like, I feel like everyone in your current team are very experienced people. Have you ever found issues with, the level of experience? And obviously there's an element of opinions, right? How do you approach differing opinions? Because obviously, as a technological solution, do you look at the technology or do you still consider opinions when it comes to communicating with team members?
So with my team, everybody kind of has his own space, so we don't really fight about much of anything.
Okay.
So the opinions, I've had some difference of opinions with with Eddie, because we're both Rust programmers. We write in the same code base, so you fight about naming, you fight um, about systems. But every time I fight with him about something, I realize that just need some time to think about it, and usually I'll go to his side because I'm wrong. He has much more education than me, and he also thinks things through a lot better than I do. So often when I'm like, oh, that's wrong, and then go, wait, but maybe you're right. So I mostly adapt to his programming style over time. I realize my fallacies, and I could improve there. So that's really great because I'm growing as a developer by working with him, and he's not by working with me. But okay. Um, but well, he is in a way, because I show him a way that you can actually move more quickly than he would have. Um, so and my design co-founder is the designer. He designs the things. We talk about it. He's a great sparring partner for the UX of a UI, of a UI, of a product, of what we're building. But also, if he says it's going to be gray or blue or green, it's going to be gray or blue or green. That's his domain. Um, and you can interact. But in terms of if I would want, so I've had a bunch of opportunities where people might join a company as a whatever first employee, as a founder, but you have to agree on fundamental principles of what you're building. Like, one of the fundamental principles of Makepad is that we're building a design tool, programming hybrid. The design tool is absolute paramount. We're not building an open source UI kit. That is not a company or a business model. That's just not happening. You need a complete product, start to finish. And if we disagree on that, then that's not going to work out. So when you're building companies, you got to be very selective about people that are on board with the vision, because you don't want to fight with your co-founders or first employees about these things. Does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely really important to have that balance and the same principles as yourselves, right? Um, in terms of
For instance, the dog food
oh yeah,
principle is one that is often backed, right? Where you're like, why? How can you say that your own use case is as important as what your first users would have? Can't really answer that with that it's as important. Maybe what we want to do is so complicated that somebody using our stuff could already use it for much simpler stuff. The answer to that is simply that I wouldn't know if it was any good if I wouldn't use it myself. Feedback cycle is much shorter. So I would much rather establish that it's good enough for us to use ourselves than trying into long cycle iteration with external customers, trying to get that information out of them. It's so slow. Why don't we just do it ourselves first and then start getting that longer cycle with external people?
well, that's interesting when you brought up around, getting feedback, essentially, right? So of course you are one of the consumers for your product.
Yeah, it
I
fits. It fits in the idea of, did you even try to use it yourself? And that is something that a lot of products currently failed. Like, you tried saving a file? Does it work? No. Well, why not? Well, because they don't use their own product. That is a big problem.
but at some point you will need to find external yeah, users as well, right? Well, at least
Absolutely.
those that about the domain, for example, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, right
Cool.
now I'm working with a friend of mine who built synthesizers. That's why I built the audio demo
I see.
recently,
Right. Yeah.
because I'm trying to get him to. He's a C++ developer that looks at Rust and goes, "Why? Why? Why can't I do that?" So he's perfect first a customer or user of our UI stack, because yeah, I have to face all those questions of why Rust does this and why does that work that way. Um,
Yeah.
but I did my best. I did my best. We'll see.
We shall see. Alrighty, I think we're coming towards the end of the podcast. Rick, it's been really great having you. And I'm so pumped right now just to be able to speak to you right now as well. Because I've learned a lot already. Just as a final message that I like to do, is there any message you'd like to get to any target audience? It's going to be mostly developers, but is there any message that you have for software developers today?
I would say um, move with the times. Move with the times. And that is me talking to me as much as the rest of the world, because everyone is seeing the machine learning wave coming, right? It's not just coming for artists that are painting 2D images, it's coming for us as well. And similarly, if you're a C++ developer and you're seeing Rust take over the system space, or you're seeing it, being the new thing, just get on the new thing, get on the wave, surf the wave, if you will. Like only if it's not about the tools, right? You can build tools, you can build languages, um, you can create new things, but just refresh with the times. Don't get stuck in a technology. Don't be the React person or the C++ guy or whatever. I didn't program Rust 3 years ago. Just started. I did C++. I learned a lot from why I hate it. I did JavaScript. I learned a lot from why I don't like it. I did Rust. I know exactly now why I don't like it. So, it's the same with everything. Like, find the things that you do like in a technology, but don't get stuck in it.
Great message to end there. Thank you very much, Rick, and see you all later.